microphone on. I'll start again. Welcome to this meeting of the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Authority, being held at our Fire and Police Shared Headquarters at Eastleigh. The meeting is being recorded and broadcast on the authority's website and will be available for repeated viewings. The press and members of the public are also permitted to film and broadcast this meeting. Those remaining at the meeting are consenting to being filmed and recorded and to the possible use of these images and recordings for broadcasting purposes. There is no scheduled fire alarm today, but should it go off, you know what to do. Out of that door, turn left into the car park, follow somebody in uniform. You know how the microphones work. Please turn yours off if it's not being used, because it tends to drain the importance. So, item 1. Adam, apologies for absence.
We've had apologies from Councillor Lucioni, and the Police and Crime Commissioner, Donna Jones, let us know that she wasn't able to attend, but her deputy, Alex Rennie, is here on her behalf.
Alex, welcome. Thank you. Welcome. Item 2, declarations of interest. Any? No. Item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. Anybody got anything to say? There is a mistake in them. Anybody spotted? Just as well we're here, Roger, isn't it? Yeah. It says, at the top, meeting of the Hampshire County Council held at the Castle Winchester. I think not.
It's already been updated on the web, and I'll update the minute book copy.
Well, mine says Winchester, and mine is the important one. Okay, so we're okay with the minutes? Good. Item 4, any deputations? Nope. Item 5, Chairman announcements. Okay, first off, the Armed Forces Covenant. On the 1st of December, our Chief Fire Officer, Sabrina, signed the Armed Forces Covenant alongside Royal Air Force Wing Commander Ian Evans. This symbolises our ongoing commitment to support of the Armed Forces community, both within our organisation and across the communities of Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, and is to be applauded. Sabrina, do you want to say anything?
Only that we hope to aim for the Gold Award next time round, Chairman. We're very proud that we've achieved the silver, but we would very much like to progress and achieve gold.
Yeah. Hope?
We will. We will. We will.
Okay, good. Next item there. Government response regarding funding. In September, I wrote to the government to highlight the financial challenges that we are facing, and I'm aware that local MPs have also written on the subject, thanks to Sally, who rustles up the Southampton MP, thank you very much, and others. In support of adequately funding the fire and rescue section, the FBU and the NFCCC are also actively supporting our cause. I received a letter back from the Minister of Fire at the end of October, and we will respond shortly now that new information has been received on a provisional settlement from the government that was published yesterday afternoon. So we shall be writing back. A provisional settlement provides us with information on funding that we will receive over the coming 3 years. My concern is that we will continue to be faced with a budget gap at a time when it is increasingly difficult to make savings in a safe and compliant way. I am also aware that devolution will bring changes in the future. The trouble is we don't know what the future is at the moment, which makes it even more difficult. It will be important that, whatever form local accountability takes, there is sufficient funding to allow the fire and rescue service to help make people and communities safer. Chief, any comment you'd like to make on that?
Yes, firstly, thank you for writing to the Minister, and thank you to all of the MPs that wrote to the Minister as well. I think it's incredibly important that we continue to raise awareness of both the changing risk that our communities face. In face of climate change, we're going to more extreme weather events than ever before. We've got growing risk groups. If you take the economic situation and the cost of living crisis, the link between increasing poverty and increasing fire risk, and our ageing population, all of which sit in some of our most at-risk groups who are the most vulnerable to fire. When you consider those things, along with the resources that we need to continue to meet that growing risk, it leaves us not just with a budget gap for what we have now, but a budget gap for what we will need for the future as well. It's really important that we have fair funding to continue to deliver our work as a fire and rescue service, and that's something that both ourselves and the trade unions agree greatly on. As part of my role within the NFCC, I chair one of the committees. I chair the Improvements Committee. That means that I have a position on the NFCC steering group where we are constantly talking about the work that we can do as a sector and as the sector voice to represent the budget need of the fire and rescue service and what we can do to make sure that budget need is met. From that national work, I also regularly meet with MHCLG and HMIC FRS, and budget needs, not just in terms of what fire and rescue services need to operate, but also to achieve our improvement aspirations is such a crucial factor, and I'll continue to lobby in all of my roles to ensure that we get that not just for the service but for the sector.
Thank you, Chief. Roger.
Thank you. I think it's very important that both the trades union side and the NFCCC and fire authorities and the LGA all campaign for the same situation. And unless we do, with doing that, I think there's a chance that we might get something out of it. But there are lots of discussions going on nationally about trying to get more money, and hopefully it will happen. My only regret is that the inspectorate, when it ever inspects us or inspects any authority, and very often the reason it's not doing what they would like it to do is because of a lack of money. But they will never put that in writing to say so. And it would be helpful, I think, if we could persuade the inspectorate to support us as well, that the sector does need more money. And then that would be very forceful as they are part of the government to try and get the money. But I suspect because they are part of the government structure, they don't want to go against their masters. And that's the unfortunate part about it.
Good point. Good point. You're brave. Good point. Members, is there anything you want to ask the Chief over what she's just said? No? Content? Okay. Thank you. Next bit on then, Local Resilience Forum, Chair and Deputy Chair appointments. At the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Local Resilience Forum, the LRF executive meeting on the 15th of December, partners confirmed the appointment of the Chief Constable, Alexis Boone, as LRF Chair and Deputy Chief Fire Officer Shantha Dickinson as LRF Deputy Chair. These appointments provide strong leadership for the LRF, ensuring that it can continue to effectively prepare for and respond to emergencies across our communities. The Hampshire and Isle of Wight LRF is widely recognised for its collaborative approach and plays a vital role in strengthening resilience across our urban, rural, coastal and island communities. Congratulations, Shantha. Chief, anything?
Just to put on record my congratulations to Shantha on that too.
Okay, next item. Celebrating our new graduates. Following today's meeting, I hope you'll all be able to attend the graduation ceremony this afternoon in the shed, where I'll wrap up warm, to congratulate our most recent trainees and celebrate with their families and friends. Is anyone not going to be able to make it? Oh, good. Full turnout. Impressive. Excellent, thank you. Moving to item 6, members' developments. I went with the Chief on October the 4th, to Nottingham for the Chiefs and Chairs meeting, which is an annual event, which is useful. And it's always useful, you know, if you only pick up one or two things, it's useful because that's where they talk about it. Chief, do you want to add anything to the day? It also, I say, gave me 6 hours alone with the chief, going up and down.
Good.
Shut up. to talk to her, get to know her, get to know what drives her, and those things. These are important because we never get the time to actually sit down and have meaningful conversations. And she drove beautifully. Anything you want to say?
Just to say, it's a really important annual event that HMIC FRS host. They are very, very useful for us to get an idea of the inspectorate's thinking and what's going to happen for the next round of inspections and where their focus is going to be. So we are very much looking forward to that. And I gave a presentation as well, which was a helpful opportunity for us to talk about some of the great work that we're doing here in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Service.
Okay, thank you. I also attended last week the emergency service carol service in Winchester Cathedral with many of you, which was excellent as always. Yesterday, the day before yesterday, we had a cadets passing out parade here, which was famously good. I mean, it really is encouraging to see the development that these young people make and the pride that the parents and friends and families all have in the process. We had a Deputy Lieutenant, Lord Ashburton, which was good. And it was a good evening, and I know some of you were there as well. And this evening, after the passing out parade, there is a cadets passing out parade in Basingstoke, which is also a great event, to which I know some of you are coming. So, on membership development, anybody want to join in and tell us what you've done? Roger.
Right. The first event I attended was the 11th of the 11th. It was a pleasure on behalf of the chairman to lay the wreath outside of the headquarters here on that day. I also attended the carol service, which was, I think, as usual, was exceptionally good. And then I've attended the fire committee on the 10th of December, and then I also attended the cadets passing out parade at Gosport on the 10th, and again on the 15th, the cadet passing out at Eastleigh. And the Eastleigh one, I thought it was so different to Gosport, and there were one or two of the young people, one particular one, who really stood out miles ahead, and I think that person will go a long, long way. She gave a speech, and she had notes, but she didn't hardly look at them. She just ad-libbed what she wanted to say, and she spoke for some time, and she was looking around the room. She was a real, I would say, good politician. But her speech was absolutely fantastic. I also attended the NJC to do with paying conditions on the 15th of December as well. But one thing I want to bring to your attention, if I can get it up, on Tuesday, I had an email from the LGA saying that Lord Goddard, a Liberal Democrat Lord from Stockport, has tabled an amendment to the which bill is it called? The bill. It doesn't. I thought it said there, but it doesn't. To do with the mayor's taking over functions, and what is tabled is that under clause 45, page 49, line 37, at the end to insert, arrange for the deputy mayor for fire and rescue to exercise one or more of the mayor's fire and rescue authority functions, and that is putting it in line with the police. So he is suggesting that the police and fire under the mayoral system should be treated equally. And I would have thought that's a very good way forward, rather than fire, as often happens, is being treated as the second citizen. And so I think whether it will ever go through, I mean, we don't know, but it's being tabled. And what the LGA like about it is that the language is must rather than may. So it is positive rather than giving them the option. So that's all I've done.
Okay, thank you, Roger. If we get more on that, we can perhaps discuss that at the next APAC.
Yeah.
If we get more of that. I would echo what Roger said about this particular graduate, who was outstanding. Her presentation skill was dynamic. I mean, I used to help people with their presentation skill, so I know about this. And she, I mean, for a young person like that, she was staggering, which is great. Curious enough, very shy. Didn't want to be photographed at all or anything, but brilliant, brilliant. Sally.
Yeah, a couple of things. So on the 5th of December, like many of us, I went to Winchester Cathedral for the Blue Light Carol service. It was my first one. It was really, really good. Put me in the festive spirit. Yeah, Winchester Cathedral was quite impressive. On the 8th of December, I met with Andy Piper at Redbridge Fire Station to see the first stage of the end of the works, the first stage there. All the old garages at the bottom have been gutted out and ready for the trucks to go in there when they remodel the main part of the station. So they're going to use that, and they've got a new entrance. And then the firefighters will be using the old truck building, and I had a bit more of that, and I was just having finishing touches and paintwork done on that. When I went in, it looks like it's going to be a really, really good transformation. And then in January they're going to start on the main part of the fire station, the trucks and everybody moved out. So that was really good, so looking forward to going back for another visit when the works progress a little bit more. I had some apologies for Gospel. I was intending on going to the Fire Cadets Pass Out Parade, but I was poorly last week. And I've also been working with Rob Cole and some city councillors that look after the ward which is in the docks with the metal fires. So I've had a few councillors approach me asking for updates, what's going to happen. Can't keep continuing. They're saying residents are getting concerned every time there's a fire. They have to keep closing their windows and doors. They're worried about the pollution that the metal fires are causing. So that's sort of ongoing with AVP. And like has already been said today, I know one of the MPs heard back from the now Fire Minister, because it keeps getting passed around. The new Fire Minister is now called Samantha Dixon. Darren Pappy's office sent me the letter that he'd received. Again, his letter got sent in September and he's only just had a response. Satvier's team, Southampton Test MP, she's still waiting for hers, but she sent her letter a couple of days after that. So maybe they're just trying to clear it all up ready for Christmas. But I've obviously let you see the letter. I haven't read it in detail yet to see if it's any different from any letters that we've had from the previous minister. Was it Alex? Norris.
Yeah.
Yeah, so hopefully Samantha Dixon flies in a new area now, so maybe it'll be looked after and thought about a little bit more. So yeah, that's my update on what I've been up to.
Okay, thank you. Fran.
Thank you. Yes, the only thing I've been able to go to was the carol service, but I was going to say that the most important thing about the carol service that I really enjoy is the time before it starts. It's a beautiful service, but you get to meet anyone who is anybody in the emergency services and to chat to them, and I think that is so valuable. And I was talking to all sorts of people, lifeboats, all kinds of people there. The band, the constabulary band, and the wellbeing choir are always wonderful. And this year, Shantha read a poem out that was really beautifully read, very poignant about the emergency services and their work over Christmas. And I think she got a deserved clap there. I think it was the only one. She started off the clapping because nobody had been clapped before that, and it was really good. And I just wanted to mention as well, and it's not really a a training issue, but a cow was rescued by Hampshire Services yesterday. It got its head stuck between two trees, and I would just like to say thank you to the animal rescue service.
Thank you, Fran. Thank you, Fran. Zoe.
Thank you, Chairman. I met with Matt and Roger for the performance report that actually we have on the agenda this morning. So in our champion role, we met with Matt prior to that on the 7th of November. I too attended the carol service at Winchester Cathedral and also the Gosport Cadet Passing Out Parade. And then with my champion role alongside Karen, we met with Molly, Director of People and Organisation, to understand and have oversight of HR activity and casework. And I think, you know, we are soon to be coming to our 1 year anniversary of taking in-house our HR services. So it was really interesting to explore those activities and casework, such as staff absences, allowances, disciplines, recruitment. Actions from the inspectorate report, so things like skills, workforce planning and utilisation, training, wellbeing and support. We also looked at management of casework, so things like average days casework take to resolve. And we also talked about how we can improve services for staff and accreditations. So Molly said that they're looking to become accredited with White Ribbon, which, as we know, is domestic abuse and violence against women and girls. So, yeah, that was really important. Thank you.
Thank you, Zoe. Lou.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go back a little bit further than everybody else because on the 8th of October I did attend the Equality Diversity training here, which was really online, but with the fire service, which was excellently presented. And following that, I undertook the White Ribbon Champion training. I would recommend that if everybody could undertake it, that would be really worthwhile. Obviously, champions are for females, and the ambassadors is the male training. On the 18th of November, in my champion role for governance, I attended a meeting on devolution with Shantha and David Drew. I believe you were you there, David? No, sorry, no. David Harrison. I think David Harrison was there, sorry. Too many Davids. All right, we can't have enough Davids, but it was, I'm sure, the officers from the MCL, Communities, Local Government and Housing, were really pleased that I was in attendance because I raised several concerns, not least of the potential problems for setting future budgets, because there will be a crossover. Obviously now, with devolution having changed, potentially, if the government is minded to cancel the elections, I don't know what that will mean ultimately for how this progresses, but there are a series of meetings that will be coming up. On the 15th of December, I also attended the Eastleigh Cadets Pass Out, which was absolutely fantastic. The young people put so much into their drilling. It was wonderful to see all their friends and family. And I'd particularly like to record thanks to all those volunteers that put in so much time with the young people, because they should quite rightly be proud of what they've achieved with them. It's wonderful to know that, to see really positive things about young people, and I do worry at a time when the press is so full of selling by hatred that we miss out on all these positive stories. And this is really positive. These young people have a bright future ahead of them, and there were some that most certainly shone, and their confidence by having undertaken this course has really come on leaps and bounds. But I believe absolutely every single one of them will go away with enriched and better prospects ahead because of having undertaken it. And I'm looking forward to this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Lou. David Drew.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm looking forward to this afternoon as well. It's always great to see the graduation ceremony. More of that next meeting, no doubt. But I too attended the carol service, and I'm delighted to hear that Fran Carpenter saw Shantha read a fantastic poem. I thoroughly enjoyed that, and as you say, the whole cathedral ended in rapturous applause because it was a well delivered and a great poem as well. So, Shantha, thank you very much indeed. I also, on the 7th of November, in my champion role, attended with Matt. Now, where is Matt Robertson?
Hospital.
Oh, he's not well. Oh, sorry about that. Do send him my best wishes because, as we all know, carbon reduction and our environmental matters are crucially important. George sits on that with me, and I was given a comprehensive update as to where we are and the processes we're going through to reduce our CO2 emissions, which are crucially important. And I was confident that we were pushing as hard and going as far as we could reasonably do, and I think that's important. So well done everyone who's doing that. But of course we all know there's more to do. That is all, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, David. To the David.
Thank you, Chairman. I didn't attend the carol service because my singing has been known to clear a cathedral pretty quickly. I did attend the cadet passing out parade, and I agree with the previous comments. It's always a really uplifting occasion. Wonderful for the cadets that pass out. A real great acknowledgement for all the volunteers that helped them through that journey. And finally, I would say a big thank you, because since being installed as chairman of the Audit and Governance Committee, I've had fantastic support from officers. They put all this scaffolding up around me that makes sure I don't go too far wrong in that role. So it's a Christmas thank you from me.
Stephen.
Just the final one from me, if that's all right. I did the diversity and inclusion thing as well. Thank you for mentioning that, Lou. I also went to the carol service, and I want to reinforce what Fran said about meeting others from other services. I was sat next to the chap from the HM Coast Guard, which was interesting because I had to kill an hour between a meeting and the carol service, which I did in a public house. No alcohol, if it's of any interest to anybody, where somebody at the same table engaged. Somebody at the same table where I was engaged in conversation commented on the Coast Guard, given that it was torrential rain at the time, and wondering whether there was any connection. But no, I told her it was just the show.
Thank you, Stephen. That's it? Okay, thank you, members. Moving to item 7, the Constitution Review Report, amendments for approval, and I would invite Paul Hodgson to present this paper, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, members. So the purpose of the paper is to bring some proposed amendments to the Constitution to you for approval. I'll just start with an apology because I understand the changes were not originally showing as track changes in ModGov. They were all in there, but they weren't shown as tracked, so were a little harder to find. And that's down to one of the challenges with ModGov, but we've managed to remedy that. So you should now be able to see the changes highlighted as track changes in the appendix. We talked about these changes at the last APAG meeting, and most of them are fairly minor cosmetic changes that don't really alter the substance of the Constitution, but they do tidy up outdated references to roles or other things that are out of step with current practice. The main substantive change relates to our approach to settling legal proceedings and clarifying that the existing provisions under which the authority approves settlement of litigation over 100,000 only applies to uninsured claims, noting that, of course, in practice for insured claims, we send those to our insurer to deal with, and they meet the liabilities out our insurances rather than out of the authority's budget. So we've clarified the wording at various points on that to try and make that work in line with that, and also to bring it in line with the 200,000 financial threshold that we use for various other things in the Constitution. So all the changes are set out in the table at paragraph 6 in the report. That's at page 10. And I'll just briefly run through them and highlight, those which are fairly minor and technical and those which are more substantive. So the first one there, which is on capital scheme abortive fees, that is at page 23 and page 69 of the pack. You'll find the track changes there. Minor technical change, really, just following a recommendation from an internal audit, and it doesn't actually change anything in the Constitution because we already did that by virtue of an environment over £200,000 requiring authority approval. It just captures and records explicitly that in relation to abortive fees for any capital scheme, that would come to the authority. So that's the first one, fairly minor. Second one then is the one I've talked about in respect of insurance claims and settling litigation. So relevant parts of the Constitution that you'll see those changes in are firstly at page 26 in the authority's terms of reference, and then associated amendments in the scheme of delegation at page 44 in the pack, and financial regulations at page 64. And as I say, that really is that is a change to the current Constitution, but it's one that I think is sensible, brings things into line with the way insurance works and brings things into line with other financial thresholds. So hopefully that one makes sense. The next change, risk and performance management, it's called in the middle column of the box now, top of page 11. That is simply a minor technical change to the Audit and Governance Committee terms of reference. That's on page 25 of the pack if you want to see it in track changes. And it really just brings things into line with what we've agreed to do to ensure we're compliant with the SIPFA guidance for audit committees. The next one on scrutiny is a proposal to remove the second bullet point, which is at page 26, which reads to consider outcomes of corporate projects and initiatives. Now, that change actually isn't showing in here at the moment, but the proposal is that we remove that bullet point. And it's simply really because it largely repeats what is in the first bullet point of that section and the third one. So I think they amply cover the things that would come for scrutiny to the authority and allow for the chairman to agree with the chief, all manner of things that could come. So that second one is largely unnecessary and arguably could, I think, start to blur the boundary between the strategic matters that the authority engages in and the operational matters for the chief. So if you agree the paper, we will remove that bullet point. The next in the table is some of the other consequential amendments. It's titled legal proceedings that I've already talked about in respect of the insurance arrangements, so we've already covered those. The next one at the bottom of page 11 in the table is special severance payments. So that is at page 26 and then also at page 65 in financial regs, and that's really just to bring the Constitution into line with a previous decision the authority made on special severance payments, which are basically certain types of payments to departing employees and the governance associated with those. The next change is called collaboration and partnership working. Again, that's a very minor technical change, and that's at page 27. For those of you who are looking at the track change version, and it's really a minor change just to reflect now what is the current practice around the information that's presented to the authority. The next change is, again, Audit and Governance Committee's terms of reference, and again, these are fairly minor cosmetic changes just to bring certain things into line with current titles, and also I think to reflect who actually attends Audit and Governance Committee. The next one down is Chief Fire Officer Deputation. So that is a change to the scheme of delegation in the Constitution, and you can find it at page 42. And this doesn't actually substantively change anything, because this is something that happens under the scheme of authorisation anyway, that the Chief will authorise others to act on her behalf and deputise in her absence. But I think it just provides some useful clarity that not only the Deputy Chief, but also the Assistant Chief, in the absence of the Deputy, can exercise the functions of the Chief, and so we don't end up with a situation where we never have somebody who can demonstrably act as the Chief in any situation. So that just captures that one. Next one is a minor change to standing orders around building access. That's at page 47, if anyone wants to see it, and it just reflects a updated approach to security in both HQ and other premises, and reflects that, you know, we will follow the building security requirements wherever a meeting's held. And then the next change is to contract standing orders, and there's a number of minor cosmetic changes there. So again, these aren't really substantive changes. They can be found pages 86, 87, and they basically bring things into line with current role titles of officers, and just ensure that contract standing orders now reflect the reality of where we are, but there's no substantive changes to things around processes, etc. under them. And then, lastly, we have a minor change to the protocol for member-officer relations. That's at pages 116 and 118. A couple of changes there, just to I think, again, the first couple to reflect current practice. And then there's an addition at 3.6 that you'll see, which we've included following a question at recent member training session, where members suggested it would be useful to have more clarity around the distinction between operational responsibilities of the Chief versus strategic matters for the Fire Authority. So we've had to go adding a bit of a summary there. It's a non-exhaustive summary, but it gives an indication of what types of things might fall into each category. So that's pages 116 and 118. So that is a very quick whiz through those changes, but very happy to take any questions.
Fran.
Thank you very much, Paul. On the new insurance claim threshold of 200,000, can you give me an example, sorry I can't see you behind me, from the last year or so, of a case that would now come to the authority that wouldn't have done before? And why is there a £200,000 cut-off, just out of interest? Thank you.
I don't think we've had any litigation in the last year, or for some time, I think, that is uninsured and with a liability of over 100,000 that needed to come to the authority. So it is quite rare. The types of things that might fall into that, we have got as part of an exempt item later, so I can refer you to that, and we can potentially come back to that later. But it is pretty rare. And the £200,000 threshold has simply been selected because we've got that elsewhere in the Constitution as the threshold above which financial matters for violence or other things need to come to the authority. Below that, the Chief has delegated authority to make financial decisions up to that amount. So I think it makes sense to bring this one into line with that, because ultimately it would be any liability that's uninsured would be met out of budgets as usual, and if it's over 200,000, it would need to come to the authority to approve a budget environment anyway. So
most will stay with the officers to deal with.
Most,
will we know about that?
yeah, I mean, most things will stay with the officers in terms of insured litigation, but I think we, Becky, I'm right in saying we'll be bringing some information to members about insured claims, if there are significant ones. So you will get to sort of understand some of those, but again, obviously, they're met out of insurances, so they don't trouble the authority's budget. And obviously anything that's uninsured will come to the authority, and there is an item later, as I say, that falls into that category.
Thank you, Fran. Lou?
Oh, no, thank you. I found what I was going to ask in another paragraph.
Okay. David Drew.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I read the pages 10 to 13 with all of the proposed changes, and they corresponded to what Paul said, unsurprisingly. So look, very happy to support that. Paul, did you say that there were other people on your team working with you? Did you mention that Alex had done a lot of...
Well, I think Alex and Becky have done all the hard work on this, so they deserve all the credit for going through the Constitution with a fine-tooth comb and...
Yeah, no, so that's great. And of course, things like constitutions are frankly not terribly exciting, but are very important. I think I want to emphasise that you know, well done for going through it. Is it an annual escape for you all to work through the Constitution to pick up the things that need updating?
We tend to do it more on a sort of as-needed basis, and then, because obviously things change from a legislation point of view and the law, so we'll pick things up and gather them together and bring them, you know, as and when. But, I mean, we could have an annual review of the Constitution Party if you'd like, colleagues.
Chairman, always keen on a party, but I wouldn't necessarily think that would be the most exciting. So thank you very much.
Probably is to us, but thank you very much.
Important. So thank you very much. Happy to support, Chairman.
Members, any further comments you wish to make? Paul, would you like to sum up?
Well, I think very helpful questions from many there, and thanks very much for... So, yeah, helpful questions and comments. So thanks for that. I think probably it's a case of going to the recommendation where we're asking you to approve, if essentially, that updated version of the Constitution that's in the pack.
Okay. So if we go to the recommendation, members, is that the proposed amendments to the Constitution be approved by the full FAR authority. Approved? Agreed. Thank you, Paul. Moving on to item 8, page 129 in your paperwork, which is the Q2 Budget Update Report. This report contains several recommendations, including recommendation 11 in relation to exempt Appendix A2, and recommendation 14, which relates to exempt Appendix C. So, if any member wants to ask questions or debate matters in the exempt appendices, the relevant recommendations will be deferred until those appendices have been considered in the exempt sessions. Anybody want to do that? No? So you're happy to move on? Okay, thank you. So I would ask Rob Safras to introduce this report, please, Rob.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, everybody. So I'm going to talk through the Q2 Budget Update Report. So there are two key areas of focus within this report. So the first thing is to have a look at the forecast for the current financial year, as at the end of Q2, so the end of September. And then I'll also try to provide a bit of context on the forward look and what might be impacting the medium-term position as we look ahead to bringing the budget setting report to the February meeting of the authority. This report was written before the announcement of the provisional local government finance settlement yesterday afternoon, but what I'll try to do is to just provide that little bit of context And then I've agreed with Sabrina that we will, I'll work things through our financial model, and I'll meet with Sabrina and the executive team early in the new year to look at the implications of the settlement on the position, to then factor that into the budget setting report for February. So starting off with the Q2 position, I think it's helpful if we go back to February 2025 and the position we were in at that point in setting the budget for the current financial year. So without any other mitigations, we were looking at a budget gap of £3.5 million approximately for this year. So what the authority agreed to do in mitigation was to agree that in-year savings of about £1.7 million would be delivered this year, and there would be a draw of £1.8 million approximately from the budget equalisation reserve, because we're required to set a balanced budget each year. So obviously using reserves to balance the budget is an appropriate solution in the short term, but isn't something that's financially sustainable on an ongoing basis. As a household analogy, it's the equivalent of having to dip into your savings each month because your income is less than the amount that you need to spend each month. So it's something you can do, but you don't want to be doing it on a regular basis. So at the end of Q1, we were forecasting that there would be a lower draw from the budget equalisation reserve than was built into the budget, which is a positive story, and the position this quarter is broadly in line with that. So what that means is instead of needing to draw £1.8 million from reserves, we're looking at a number more in the region of £650,000, so a difference of about £1.1 million. So the main reason for this difference is that there is a forecast underspend on non-operational staffing. So as one of the things that the service has been doing to deliver the savings within the budget, there's been a piece of work on organisational design taking place, so looking at how the different structures within the organisation work and making sure that these are the best fit that they can be. Throughout that process, the directors have been holding a number of vacancies as that process has been worked through, and so there is an underspend on the non-operational staffing. We've also got some additional savings delivery in the year, which we've talked about in previous meetings, to do with the lower costs that we're now seeing with the Airwave contract. So that was a lower cost that we weren't expecting when we were setting the budget. There are a number of other different ups and downs against the budget. One of these is to do with premises costs. So there's been some additional one-off costs that have arisen this year that we're having to fund. One of those relates to some uninsured costs to do with the authority's exit from Fort Widley. And there is a recommendation in the report to approve an additional £150,000 of uninsured costs, which is to do with some asbestos that has been found whilst the work has been taking place to come out of that site. There's also a recommendation in the report to transfer some money into the capital payments reserve. So as we've talked about in previous meetings, the authority receives no capital grant from government, so any funding of the capital programme will largely come from the revenue budget in one of two ways. So either through contributions into reserves or through the use of borrowing. So the recommendation here is to put some more money into the capital payments reserve to fund some of the future pressures that the authority will have on capital. The reason that that's possible is to do with two things. So one of those is reserves balances haven't fallen as fast as had been forecast. So that means the authority has more money in the bank, and where the interest rates are also continuing to be higher, the interest income is more than was assumed within the budget. It's also because the capital programme has been delivered more slowly than was originally planned, and because some of the capital programme is funded from borrowing, where the spend hasn't happened yet, we haven't had to borrow as much yet, and so therefore aren't having to set aside the same amount of money to pay for borrowing costs. So the table within the report assumes that that recommendation is approved. And there's also a recommendation related to the Networked Fire Services Partnership budget. So because some of the IT costs have ended up being lower than was budgeted, it means there's an opportunity to build some money into the budget with respect to staff. So that's staff costs for people directly employed by the service, but also through the partners. And that will mean that we don't need to take funding from reserves to pay for those ongoing costs. The reason that's covered here as a recommendation for the authority is because there's a requirement within the financial regulations for anything that is moving a budget from non-pay to pay to be approved by the authority, and that's what this will be doing. So I'll pause there, having talked about the current year's position, to see if anyone's got any questions on that.
Sally, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. On page 133, just wondering, it's a £14,000 overspend on transport costs. What does that include? What does transport costs? Yeah.
So that will be costs of things like running the fleet, so yeah, the fuel and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Okay, David, Drew?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. On the same page, 133, there's a line item C, non-operational staff. Are these staff that are non-operational, that don't operate? Or should we call them support staff, because actually they are crucial to the operation of the organisation? And if they are, then we should call them what they are, not give the impression that they're non-operational. Joking aside, I think that's important because it refers to them as to what they actually, the important role they play. And I see we're 1.4 million underspent there, and I'm concerned that because I'm keen for reassurance that not having support staff to that extent is not, to be assured that that's not impacting on our ability to firefight and provide a rescue service. The reason I ask that is because it's often the case, well, we need more frontline staff, we need more people on the front line. And in an historical context, Chairman, I always like the example of how many people did it take to put a Spitfire in the air during the Battle of Britain? About 200. When you add in all the chefs, the support, other support staff, the nurses, the doctors, etc., HR, I could name all around here. And so are we underspent badly by impacting on the way we can do our job? And can we please change non-operational staff to support staff? Also, I don't mind what it is, but it just gives the impression that they're not operating when obviously they are in a crucial way. Thank you.
Good point. I do like your analogies there. Keep them coming. They're very good. Very good. Can we do that, Chief? Molly?
Yes, we can do that.
We can do that.
The crucial question of the 1.4 million underspent, just to make sure that that's not impacting on our ability to do our job as an authority.
Molly?
I'm happy to respond on that one. In terms of the underspend, as Rob has said, that was about us undertaking the organisational design work in order to deliver our savings plan. So when we undertook that work, one of the key things that we looked at was the roles and responsibilities of all of the support staff roles, to understand which of those are kind of most critical to the organisation, and therefore which ones we would need to prioritise in order to continue to deliver our core function and purpose in terms of serving the community. So the redesign has ensured that those roles which are kind of most critical to the success of the organisation have remained, and those organisations where we felt we could either kind of lose posts or have less than those number of posts is where we've achieved the savings. So in making all of those decisions, the kind of ability to continue to deliver our purpose was at the forefront of all of the directors' minds.
That's fantastic. And Molly, can I thank you for renaming the staff on the fly instantly to support staff? That's great, thank you.
Thank you. Lou, please.
I want to also come back on the support staff, which is obviously when there are fewer staff members, there can be unfortunately sometimes additional pressures on those that remain, with a desire to want to not let anybody down by stopping work. Are we reassured that staff are being supported to be able to do the new role but not take on too much, because it can be very burning for people who find that their teams have got smaller? Thank you. And well done to everybody.
Thank you, Lou. Fran, please.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. Are you confident that the underspend we've got now won't change by the end of the year, and also to an overspend, because you've said here as well that the expected budget gap for you're expecting a budget gap next year, and how are we going to deal with that one, basically?
So staffing is the biggest part of the budget. So although we do our forecasting on a quarterly basis, I have asked the team to have a look at how things were looking at the end of November, and from a staffing forecast point of view, things look like they're broadly on track with what we've forecast. So based on what we know at the moment, I think the forecast is still looking to be on track. I'll obviously do a more thorough update for you in February. In terms of the budget gap that we've got for next year, I'll come on to talking about that as I run through the forward look. But yes, that is one of the key things we need to think about, is how to cover that gap. Yeah.
Any more members? Fine. Rob, do you want to sum up?
So I'll now talk about the forward look. So this is obviously set against the context of the period since the beginning of austerity, really. So we've had the challenges that have arisen for the national public finances and the impact that has had on us locally. So we've had the period of austerity, we've had the pandemic, and we've had a period of high inflation as well. And that's been having an impact on us from the point of view of the funding that we receive, but also the way that costs have been increasing significantly as well over that period. So there's a chart on page 136 that tries to visually show over the last 3 years the different inputs into the budget, and you can see that line for inflation at the top of the chart is quite significant. And the bars at the bottom of the chart show that it hasn't been possible to rely purely on increases in council tax and funding to cover the pressures that have been on the budget, and therefore there's been the delivery of savings and the use of reserves to pay for that. So we've also had challenges due to the single-year settlements that we've received since the last multi-year settlement was in 2016-17. And that means that we have often not known what our funding for the next year is going to be until around this sort of time in the year, which does have an impact then on our financial planning. So it's really helpful for us that the current settlement that was provisionally announced yesterday will give us 3 years' worth of information to support our planning. And so, as I mentioned, I'll be working through how that impacts on the model, financial model, and speaking to the chief and the team about what the options are there. What it will mean is that we do have an ongoing budget gap looking at over the 3-year period. So if you think about the reason for that being, we came into the year with a £1.8 million gap that we needed to cover in this year from reserves, even after delivering savings. There's some additional savings going into the 26-27 year, which is on the positive side of the ledger, but we've also got additional delivery pressures as well, and then the impacts of inflation and the changes in funding that we need to work through the model as well. So we're working from an assumption that we are going to have a budget gap over the next 3 years, and so there'll need to be some options considered to address that budget gap. In terms of the settlement, what we're expecting to see and what is that the funding from government will go down over the 3 years, but not by as much as we had feared back in the summer. So that's good that it's not going down by as much as it could have done. The government assumes that all fire and rescue authorities will increase council tax by the maximum allowed without a referendum. That's one of the core assumptions in calculating the funding allocations. And so there will be a recommendation to you in February to agree that increase in council tax, because the government is assuming that will happen in the way that it allocates the funding to the Fire and Rescue Authority. Core spending power is an interesting concept. It's a way that the government compares the resources that are available to different local authorities across the country. It's an aggregation of the assumed council tax income and some of the funding that comes from central government. Our core spending power will go up, and that will be a mixture of council tax going up and government funding going down, but in aggregate the two will be going up. So there's a number of other considerations that we need to keep in mind as well when it comes to looking at the budget. So we're obviously affected by inflation. That has an impact in year in terms of costs, but it also erodes the value of the reserves that we have to pay for investment in capital and in equipment in the future. We're also impacted by interest rates. So because we need to borrow to fund elements of the capital programme, we have some sensitivity to interest rates. So we work with the Treasury advisors, Arlen Close, to try to make sure that we can borrow in the most cost-effective way that we can do. We also, as I've mentioned previously, receive no capital funding from government, so we need to be setting aside money from reserves to pay for capital investment or funding it through borrowing, which has a knock-on impact on the revenue budget as well. We have the uncertainty around devolution, so we don't know how that will impact the funding and the way that the finances work in the future. And there are also a number of delivery pressures that inevitably arise as things change that we need to consider in terms of making sure that the service can be delivered in the best way possible and to meet the various requirements on it. So I'll also briefly mention the efficiencies and savings progress. So there is a table in the report that shows that we are on track to overachieve against the target that the authority approved, which is very helpful, because what that means is that that money goes directly towards reducing the budget gap for the future years without having to think of new things to cover that element of the gap. There are some risks there around the future costs of the Emergency Services Network, ESN. So we've got a temporary lower cost base for the next few years, but we do need to be mindful, and we're working through what the impact of the ESN changes will be in future. So we're assuming there's a budget gap for the next 3 years. There are a number of different ways that you can potentially address a budget gap. One of those is through changes in funding. There's very little that we can do in this regard because the settlement sets out the funding from government, and although the decisions around changes in council tax are a local decision for the fire authority to make, the government has assumed that the increases will be at the maximum allowed without a referendum. So that is part of the assumption in the government funding model. There's also opportunities to generate income, and that's something that this authority does well, particularly around some of the work that's done through the corporate services team, for example, with the way that the estate is used. But that's only ever going to be a relatively small proportion of the budget that comes from income. It's incredibly helpful, but it's not going to be something that can cover the whole of any pressure that there is on the services budget. So then the remaining two options are to do with the use of reserves and the delivery of further savings. So the financial management policy includes a number of principles relating to savings, and within that, talks about delivering savings in a way that is sort of doing them at the right time to be able to best support the delivery of the safety plan. So a number of savings are already being delivered at the moment and will feed into 26-27 as well. There is a balance remaining in the budget equalisation reserve, and that balance is higher than it would otherwise have been if the outturn position for this year is as forecast at the end of Q2, so we won't be taking as much money out of that reserve as we thought we were going to have to. But as mentioned earlier, using reserves to cover a budget gap is a short-term solution. It's not financially sustainable in the longer term. So one option that is available to the authority that I'll be discussing with the Chief and the team is that the budget equalisation reserve could be used over the period 26-27 to cover the budget gap, to allow a considered period to develop any further savings proposals that could then be implemented from 2027. And so there's a recommendation within the report to note that there is likely to be a budget gap and to note that there may be a need to develop a further savings programme, but we'll bring back some more information on that in February. The only other thing that I will add is just to say that there are a few other sections in the report covering an update on the capital programme, which is largely just to reprofile expenditure across years. There's also a summary of the Treasury Management appendix. The Treasury Management report went to the Audit and Governance Committee on the 5th of December for a more detailed examination, and also the prudential indicators were required to prepare and an update on reserves, which will be more fully updated as part of the reserve strategy in February. So I'll leave that there, but very happy to take any questions that you might have.
Members, Zoe, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Rob, and the senior team actually to the mitigations that have currently been put in place, and obviously the situation and the better situation that we find ourselves in financially. However, obviously the future does look really uncertain and quite critical and quite hard for not just us as a fire service, but I think many fire services across the country. So I do want to look to what that future looks like in sort of the 2 and 3 year period. And I think, you know, we talked about further saving programmes and continual ongoing budget gaps and use of reserves and options. And it's really difficult. And I'm grateful that you mentioned, obviously, the financial management plan and the principles, because they are really important to the core of some of the decision making we're going to have to make. And I feel quite reassured that they're quite sound and we're using them. So I want to be mindful of that to start off with. In the report, obviously, we do refer to things on page 40 that if funding remains the same, so if nothing changes and all of the impacts that we've talked about doesn't change, and the budget gap continues, then we are going to have to make continued savings and efficiencies, which is really difficult. And then on page 43, your table of impacts of the financial position was really interesting and really useful. I think regarding the inflation, I would actually say I think you use the language, the volatility of national finances, because I think it's far more than inflation. You know, and similar to businesses, things like national insurance increases, people don't realise we weren't fully funded. That has impacted our position and some of the decisions that we make. So I think it's really important that we talk about national finances and also the volatility of the national landscape. And then normally they come at us quite quick. These are not policy or changes, and the volatility is immediate. Normally we're not aware of them until the day of the announcement or the change itself. So I really do think that we maybe need to refer to some of that volatility in policy that is there as well, because we know we've mentioned devolution, local government reorganisation, and we can already see recently that change was quite dramatic, from understanding the path that we were on to the day 24 hours later suddenly realising that isn't the path that we're on. So I think it would be really good to maybe include some of that in our risk management and understanding the impacts as on financial. On page 143, you obviously go through those options. Increased funding, which we know from the financial settlement isn't an option. You talked about council tax increase. There's only so much that we can build in with that. We have to be mindful of obviously how we operate, but also the cost of impact and the cost of living to the members of the public. So it's a really fine balance. B, you talk about increased income. We know that that can be also be quite volatile because we've got a paper coming about property matters, so things like leases are not sustainable and they change again, so managing that is also quite difficult. We talk about using reserves. You've said that we're looking at 26, 27. Beyond that is going to be very difficult. It's very short-term fix, a bit like a sticking plaster. There's only so much that we can do. I think it's really great that in your previous statements that you mentioned that we are topping up the capital programme reserve. And then we also then talk about reducing expenditure. That is becoming increasingly difficult. And I refer back to our financial management plan and our principles. We are here to offer a service and we have those core service and that duty of safety and care. So how do we fulfill and continue to fulfill that safety plan that we all agree to as well? I think for me, that is going to be key, and maybe there is some questions that we can ask ourselves around that. Are there things such as a peer review or an independent panel that we could look at when we are talking about efficiency or savings? We are now getting to a point that it isn't about taking things away and looking at efficiencies in saving budgets immediately. These are long-term impact to services, so therefore things like an independent panel review can be really useful because they see things that we don't see. So getting that external review in. I would also say strategically as well, when we talk about savings and efficiency, we have efficiencies driven by savings, and then we have efficiencies driven by transformation. And that's why I also mentioned about the capital programme reserve, because when we talk about transformation, we are transforming for the new demands that we have as a service, and we also are transforming and innovating when we are talking about addressing things like staff safety and contamination. So I think maybe when we talk about future savings, strategically I'd quite like some of that separation, because there are always savings that are a must-have, must-do, and to fulfil our safety plan and our management and financial principles. But when we talk about transformation that also drive efficiencies, they are sometimes the longer-term evolution of the service that are also a priority. And I just think it may be clearer when we are talking about savings of those hard decisions that we might have to make and can't make because of critical service, to what we are talking about from transformation. It's a sad state that we find ourselves in, and we are doing the right thing by government, but I don't think just by working and bringing this to government attention is the only thing that we should be doing, because I don't have faith that actually that's going to be quick enough to help us in the current situation. But thank you.
Chief, I sent you some time ago some details of an external financial management organisation who would like to come and talk to us. We might refer to that later.
That one wouldn't be the same point that Councillor Huggins is picking up on, but it is. Sorry, forgive me.
Yeah.
Sorry, it is something that HMICFRS explore within their inspections. We can also explore whether there are any other opportunities through the National Fire Chiefs Council that might be appropriate in that context as well.
Okay, thank you, Zoe. David Harris.
Thank you, Chairman. It's always very difficult to follow Councillor Huggins with a speech like that. You've clearly given a lot of thought. I'm reminded that the first duty of government is to keep us all safe. And we are probably one of the premier organisations that carry that responsibility. And as with any worker that requires tools, we need to have the necessary tools in order to do the job properly. And I think probably one thing that we all agree upon is that we are reaching a point where we will not have the necessary resources and our future as a sustainable organisation is seriously at risk. Now, on the basis that you can make cuts again and again, and we've been doing that for years and years now, I think there must be a risk that we will make a cut that will have very severe consequences. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to be party of it. And I think that what we should do is approach this on the basis of no stone unturned. One of my suggestions would be, and it's a question for Rob and also for other members of the authority, is that the traditional thinking is that we shouldn't go to a referendum because, number one, people don't generally vote to pay more tax. Number two, it's very expensive to hold a referendum. But I think maybe we should consider doing it now. And the reason I think this is because I think the public out there recognise the very special value of the fire service. And I think that if we made it very clear why we need the extra money, what it will achieve in terms of their safety, I think we can make a really compelling case. And I think also with the county council elections coming up on May the 7th, isn't that an opportunity to hold a referendum at the same time? Because the cost of doing it would be much reduced. People are coming out to vote anyway. So you know, I think that we should go along that route, but I'd be interested in what Rob thinks and what other members think.
Yeah, but whose decision is it?
I would defer to the monitoring officer.
Monitoring officer. Whose decision is it to do that?
Sorry, could you just repeat?
A referendum.
A referendum.
Well, that would be the authorities.
Sally, do you want to speak on the same stuff? Okay,
Yeah.
go on.
Yeah, I'd like to say, putting party politics aside, I agree with David. I've actually suggested it to the MPs, to put it to ministers, to say put the council tax levy up on fire, be able to lift the what's the word? Is it precept? To lift that, and I was turned down to say people don't vote, like you said, to raise taxes. But I then said, if you put it in a way where you say to residents, this is for fire, I think you'd be really surprised. I think there'll be people that would actually support to secure the fire service. Yes, it's a tax, but we need the fire service, and I think residents would agree with that. So yeah, I'd be in favour of a referendum.
Okay, Lou?
Well, I can't compete with what Zoe said at all. I wanted to highlight the fact that we are forced into a position after years of austerity, and frankly the fact that government assumes we will have to put up our council tax to the maximum just to and bases its allocation of its funding to us is absolutely obscene, frankly. We don't receive capital funding, and I think that government is in a mess, and some of that is inherited, absolutely, but it is a mess that we find ourselves here looking to cut and cut and cut further. Transformation is great, but that takes time. Transformation is often requires upfront spending to perhaps on IT and various other things to get us to that place. And I'm really worried about our savings being deferred till 27-28 because we are setting up the new mayor potentially to pick up something that they've not been party to. And I blame government for that because the mayor should have been in next year and those conversations could have been held with them in advance. So, yeah, frankly, I'm depressed, and like you, Councillor Harrison, I'd be definitely all for us having a referendum, but I think government had a really easy opportunity. They could say 5% and then lifted that capping amount, which was £5. They could have lifted that to £10 because that doesn't sound unreasonable. And I think that's the trouble because we always talk in percentages. Those percentages make that amount very, very low. So I think government has missed an opportunity, and I feel sad for the service because of it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Fran, please.
Well, on that subject of referendum, I mean, there are other services that the county provide, for example, adult care, children's services. They are also life-threatening, you know what I mean. What's the word I'm trying to think of? Critical services to life, yeah. And I just wonder if maybe we should, the county and the fire authority should speak together and see if there's something, because it's been talked about for ages, raising the cap on the precept. So I just wonder if it's something we can do together, because fire is important, so are all the other services as well.
Okay, thanks. Roger?
Thank you. Before I go into what I was going to say, can I just ask, on the chart on page 136, can I assume that the funding is government funding and the other is probably property income in the main?
Yes, so the other was, there were various sort of more technical adjustments to the budget that didn't really fit in one of the other categories, so I just had to put it as other.
Right.
I can come back to you with the underlying information if that would be helpful.
Because what I was interested in is those two at the top. Right. Thank you very much for that information. I think what we've got to really remember is the words of our previous chief when we did the cuts last time. His words were, I would not recommend going any further in the front line cuts. And I'm sure Sabrina would believe in that the same way is that Neil did. So having said that, and you look at this chart, you see that the funding from government is being kept down and they're pushing up the council tax. Now, in doing that, they're reneging, in my opinion, on their responsibility of the payment that is needed to provide. And people have said fire. I think we've got to remember it's not fire, it's fire and rescue. And the rescue element is a very large part of the work which is done, because we have flooding to deal with and we have road accidents to deal with. So there's lots of things, and also rescue covers a multiple of situation. You can't define the situation because you never know what it's going to be. If there's any emergency at all, who is going to be called? The Fire and Rescue Service, not the police, not the county council. It's going to be the Fire and Rescue, and the government is forgetting that element of it, I think. And while I can see what David is saying, and Sally and Lou, you can't keep on pushing the council tax. I think the people would be probably in a referendum pay it, because it'd be interesting from the Treasurer what sort of figure one would be thinking about, because that would be the crucial point. Now, government, the previous government started it, and this one is continuing it, has had an aim to reduce the amount of money that they are paying into all stages of local government, no matter where it is, or what it is, and therefore let the council taxpayer pay it. Now, I would argue that national taxation is a fair form of taxation, is based on your ability to pay. If you earn a lot, you pay a lot. If you earn little, you pay little. And that is fair. The council tax isn't fair. It's based on the property you live in, and you can be a person which has got a large property and pays a large council tax. Okay, if their financial income is so reduced, they will get benefits. But that still doesn't help the situation. So I think we've got to really keep on pressing government, because this chart on page 136 shows that over the year, the amount of funding is not being kept at pace with council tax to funding from government. The margin is growing, and I suspect it will grow in what the government wants to do. So I think what we've got to do is, we can't cut frontline in any way, shape or form. There is no way we can cut that. I mean, I support what all has been said in the past, that we're now, and sometimes we have problems. We know that. And therefore, we've got to make sure the front line is not cut in any way. In actual fact, personally, and I think probably everybody around this table would like to put more money into frontline, because there is a need to guarantee 101% that anybody dialing 999, they'll get the response. And that is so important. And when you look at it, the largest part of our budget is those very important people who are on the front line. There are other very important people as well in the support services that David mentioned. But in proportion, you look at it, and what is it? It's mainly wages, salaries. And the only way you're going to save on that is cut people. And we can't afford to cut people. So we've got to keep on pressurising. We've got to work with the LGA. We've got to work with the NFCCC. We've got to work with the MPs, and we've got to work with the unions. And we've got to have an absolute front at the government, because government is reneging 101% on its duty to protect the people right across the country as far and risk is concerned. Sorry to say what I've said, but that's how I feel very strongly about it. And we must not look at cutting front line. Thank you.
Okay, Roger. Good. Stephen?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. This is interesting. I've heard what members have said, and I agree with nearly all of it. I'm trying to get away from the politicisation thing, because we're in danger of straying into that. Because whilst I agree with a lot of the criticisms of the government and all that kind of thing, it's not going to help us. I'm trying to keep to a kind of practical thing. The difficulty with the referendum is you have to bet some millions of pounds to run a referendum in the hope that you win. And if you win, then the people lose in terms of money, but we get the budgeting we need. But if we lose, we've lost some millions of pounds from our budget, and therefore, whilst we are in difficulties now, we'll be in a couple of £1 million more difficulty once we've done the referendum. That's the challenge, and that's the bet. Are we prepared to take that bet? Roger's point about keeping going at government and stuff is absolutely right. I support him to the hilt. I have zero confidence it's going to produce a result, but we should still do it. Do all of it, and do it as loudly as we can, as strongly as we can. But the government is currently on a programme of moving funding from what they perceive as being wealthy areas to what they perceive as being less fortunate areas. And we are effectively suffering from that. They're not going to stop doing it because they believe they have good and valid reasons for doing it. And you know that is the political reality that we have to accept. So there is no magic bullet. There is no way of ensuring that we've got the funding that we need going forward that guarantees we'll get it. We've got to keep trying. We've got to keep writing to anybody we can write to, badgering anybody we can badger, lobbying anybody we can lobby, all of that. I'm not convinced we're going to get a good result out of that, but we've got to keep doing it. I think the referendum thing is probably a bet too far, because it is a bet.
David. Thank you, Tim.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I wasn't sure I was going to say anything, but I thought that I would just very briefly. It's terribly easy to ask for more money, and it does look like we need it. But I'm a passionate believer in technology, innovation, and I'd like to see ways we can reduce the fires starting in the first place. Not sure how we do that, but I know there are methods for doing it. And if you look at the history of this country over the last couple of hundred years, can I just say I haven't been around for the last couple of hundred years, just to get, but it's all been about technology and innovation and doing more for less and making cars safer, and this has all been technology driven. So I'm just putting in a plea, having listened to those who are saying we do need more money. Well, I guess right now we do, but to encourage innovation and to see how we can get perhaps individuals, the private sector, to come up with solutions as to how they can stop fires starting in the first place, how they can ensure that fires get put out more quickly. How we do that, I think, has got as big a part to play as finding more money for more fire engines and fire personnel on the front line. Thank you.
David?
Thank you for letting me come back, Chairman. It's been a good debate. I still favour a referendum, but I would like to do so on the basis of better information. I've mentioned the fact that we've got the county council elections, so what might be a couple of £1 million might be rather less, and I suspect it would be substantially less to hold a referendum than it otherwise would. In terms of the balance of risk, the biggest risk is carrying on as we are and hoping that the government will come cavalry-like to rescue us, because that ain't going to happen. And I understand Roger's point about lobbying everyone, MPs, ministers and all the rest of it, but I think we have to assume, based on past experience, that we're not going to get any extra money. So I would urge members to focus on the risk of doing nothing and just hoping that the government will do something, or holding a referendum where we know how much it will cost. And I genuinely think, yes, there is a risk, as Councillor Parker mentions, there is a risk that the public may not vote for an increase. But again, if we know what the actual increase might be per household, I think most people out there would probably vote in favour, and we would get the necessary money that we need.
Okay.
Certainly. If I can quickly come back, Mr. Chairman, I think this debate this morning has really proved one thing: how complicated, and there's no simple answer to it. And I think sometime, whether it's at an APAG, we need to set a whole half a day aside and really have a concentrated input or discussion of how we can look to the forward and ways of funding. Now, whether it's referendum, whether it's continuing asking, or new technology, whatever, what we need to know, what are the possible technological innovations, and what is, as David says, what would be the cost of a referendum? What would be the sort of amount we'd be asking for? And that's why I think what we need to do, this is proved, it's a complicated area, but we all, I think, share the same opinion. We're at a crossroads, and therefore surely we should have a good debate at sort of an APAG or a special meeting or whatever, however we want to do it, to look at all the futures and all of the options. Thank you.
Okay, here's what I think. I'm going to pinch one of David Drew's great remarks, which was made about the. You do. Made about Northern Ireland, which was, you know, if you think you have the answer, you clearly haven't understood the question, which is what's going on here. Yeah, I like what you say, David Harrison, although I don't know at all what the ramifications are of having one of these things, but we'll find out. And I think we ought to examine this at the next APAG, which would be the place to do it, because doing nothing may not be the answer. I mean, I just don't know what it. My worry is, though, that if we did get a what's the word I'm grasping for? A referendum. Would that then give the government even less incentive to get us more money? That's my worry. You know, they can say, "Oh, well, they're going to raise it themselves. We won't bother." That's my slight worry. But then we don't know because it's all up in there. Let's take this to the APAG, where we can discuss it. And in the when is the next APAG? Anyone know?
Next year.
Oh, long way away. In the meantime, we can make some preliminary inquiries about what it entails to have a referendum, because I have absolutely no idea. But David, good, thank you. Just a straw poll. Who at the moment would favour a referendum? Okay, well, enough to make it discussable. Are you happy with that, people? Yeah. Rob, thank you. There are some recommendations. There are 10 of them. They vary between noting and agreeing, so I will just read them out and do them one by one for this last paper. First off, that the forecast outturn position for financial year 25-26, including the delivery of the required savings, is noted by the full authority. Next, that transfers from the capital financing budget of 0.6 million and the interest income budget, 0.6 million, to the capital payment reserve, paragraph 21 of page 22, are approved by the authority. That an additional 150,000 to meet uninsured costs of withdrawing from facilities at Fort Widley, paragraph 24, is approved by the full authority. Approved. That the varment of realign of the budget of NSSP costs, paragraph 24, are approved by the authority. That the forecast of a budget gap for 26-27 and beyond, even assuming council tax is increased by the maximum allowed without a referendum, is noted by the full authority. That the need to identify potential options for the further delivery of savings, given the forecast ongoing budget gap, is noted by the full authority. That the updated capital programme forecasts, Appendix A1 and A2, are approved by the full authority. That the quarterly prudential indicators of paragraph 69 are noted by the full authority. That the Treasury Management Mid-Year Report, Appendix B, is approved by the full authority. And lastly, that the uninsured liabilities and associated urgent decisions of the Chief Financial Officer set out in Appendix C are noted. Thank you. Your time will come. Right, thank you. Moving on to item 9, the mid-year performance update, which starts on page 167 of your paperwork. And I would ask Alex Quick, who is kindly standing in for Matt Robertson, who is having his shoulder done in hospital. Alex.
Thank you, Chair. This is the 25-26 mid-year performance report update. So it's a regular report that we provide to yourselves with the first 6 months of our performance around a range of indicators. It covers the period April to September, and the report's outlined in Appendix A. It follows a similar structure to last year's mid-year report, which is effectively split into 2 parts. The first part talks around various improvement activity that we've delivered in the first 6 months of this financial year. And we have revised our approach slightly to corporate planning, which means a wider range of activities are included within the report this time round. There's also a renewed focus on our approach to impact assessments and how we evaluate those activities. The second part of the report in Appendix A, again, follows the structure of last year's mid-year report, and it goes through our performance in a range of areas. The only slight change is it's been restructured around our new safety plan strategic objectives. So I'm going to talk you briefly through each of those parts and then take any questions at the end. So part one, as I say, outlines various improvement activity. Our new approach to planning prioritises activities effectively into three categories: must, should and could. And for the purposes of the report, we've focused on the must activities. Now in 25-26, we have 61 of those activities to be delivered across the financial year. And so far in the first 6 months, we delivered 17 of those. Some details and examples of those are outlined in page 6 of Appendix A. Gives you a flavour of what we've delivered to date. And the annual performance report, which we'll bring in June, will give you a fuller reflection of all the activities that have been delivered across the financial year. Moving on to part 2, which, as I say, outlines our performance in a number of areas. I will go through that on an exception basis. It starts talking about the first priority that we have, which is around how we are preparing and responding to emergencies. So I'll call out a select number of indicators for you. From an incident perspective, the main headline there is that we saw a slight increase overall compared to the same period last year, to the tune of around 8%. That was wholly due to an increase in fires, which grew around 36% due to a very busy year that we had in the summer. It was our busiest since 2022. We also saw a slight increase in our medical response incidents, particularly in terms of cardiac arrest response, where we've provided emergency medical response. We also saw a slight increase in our on-call availability, and I think it's worth just pausing to reflect that a number of on-call stations provide a significant amount of valuable cover, and our top 10 stations had availability over 86%, so providing a lot of support across the communities of Hampshire and Isle of Wight. Whole time availability did drop slightly, but it remains around 97%. That was primarily due to the focus on reducing our overtime costs, which, as the report outlines, we reduced by over £100,000. The report also outlines that we saw a slight increase in critical response times, and I know we've previously given updates to members on some of the factors for that. The report also outlines that there's a number of factors at play there. Some of that is around our call handling and the fact that the range of calls we're dealing with is increasingly complex, or there's a partner agency angle related to it. We also saw more calls in on-call station grounds, which has obviously had a slightly longer response time. If I move on to how we have protected people, especially those that need it the most, like with previous reports, we continue to see really strong performance in our delivery of safe and well visits, which, whilst dropped very slightly on the same period last financial year, we are on track to deliver our annual target at the end of this financial year. The report also outlines that we've delivered a range of prevention campaigns, for example, around cooking-related fire safety, road safety, but also wildfire prevention as well. And I think it's also important to note that the report calls out other prevention activity that we do beyond those safe and well visits, including work with children and young people and other areas. Also positively, we continue to see low number of fire-related fatalities. Those reduced slightly on last year's figures, and our casualty figures have remained stable, which in the context of the increase in fires I mentioned earlier, again, is particularly positive. We, in other areas of community safety, have also delivered slightly more fire safety-related interventions, up by about 4% on the year before, which is positive. And you'll note from the report that we, as at the 30th of September, remain in date for all our highest risk information, including our SSRIs and ops and support plans. If I move on to some of the people-related indicators, we have seen slight increase in sickness, but it is not a significant increase. That's primarily due to a slight increase in musculoskeletal related absence. I also wanted to note that we continue to see really positive progress in our PDR completion rates, which I know is something you've focused on previously. In terms of health and safety events, those have been fairly consistent in number, and whilst you might note that the number of or the proportion of lagging indicators increased, that's primarily due to work by our health and safety colleagues to make sure that events that were being flagged as cause for concerns but weren't actually are being channelled through the appropriate channel. So that's led to that shift in terms of the leading and lagging percentage. And then I would lastly sort of move on to the section around how we're ensuring the best use of our funding, people and assets. Rob has obviously talked in depth about our financial position, so I won't go into that any further. But the report outlines the fact that we've made really positive progress in our carbon reduction, which is reduced by around 21% from our baseline position in 1920. The report also outlines our refreshed and reinvigorated approach to evaluation and gives a sense of some of the work that we're doing in the evaluation space, including around the HR function, which was mentioned earlier in the authority meeting, and outlines our approach to service learning in some of those higher risk areas. So I appreciate I've cantered through a sort of a wide range of areas there, but myself and colleagues here happily take any questions you might have on any part of the report.
Alex, thank you. Thank you. Members? George.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've got a number on this report. Just before I ask my first few questions, can you just confirm on page 169 it says co-responder calls? Can you just confirm what that means by co-responder calls? Just to make sure I got the right thing before I ask it.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for the question. So that would be our on-call teams that would utilise a car in their locality to respond to medical emergencies as part of a kind of community response across all of our geographical areas, slightly different to what was mentioned earlier in terms of our cardiac response, which we would carry out as part of a team responding on a fire appliance.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So, like, I've brought up this before, but obviously you stated about obviously responding to cardiac calls and stuff like that, which I fully support because obviously that's a good thing. But obviously that ordinarily sits with the NHS. They don't provide us any funding for this, do they? So we are using our fire authority money, is that correct? But without any compensatory money back to support our service.
So just a point of slight clarity there. So we do receive cost recovery for our co-responder calls that we carry out on behalf of SCAS, so across Hampshire. Slightly different, our cardiac response that we carry out in certain locations, so the Isle of Wight and also across here on the mainland, we don't receive cost recovery from. So just slight difference on that.
And do we know how much that is that we don't recover? Roughly, I'm not asking for a figure now, but do you know as an authority?
Yeah, I could find the figures for you. I'd have to speak to colleagues to try and understand that. But I wouldn't say that it is significant cost. I suppose the bit that I would add, and I was recently at a station on the Isle of Wight who provide that service of cardiac response, and whilst they do save a number of lives in terms of that service that they provide, what it's also reflected by colleagues and also Isle of Wight Ambulance Service as an example, is a significant difference that makes to those in need at that time to have somebody coming in and having a trusted brand, a trusted face, if you like, in attendance at their worst time. So there is a cost, but there's also a significant difference that makes to those that need it at that time, I suppose.
Yeah, I think I fully support it, Chair.
Sure.
Obviously,
No,
I don't think we should ever cut that. I'm not suggesting that for a second. It's just I think that when we're also discussing about the possibility of a referenda because we can't meet our cost, if we're burdening some of the costs of the NHS or providing a service to the NHS, I think it's only fair and reasonable that the NHS compensate the fire authority for those costs because we're providing a service. I'm not saying if the NHS turn around and say, no, we're not going to give you the money, we say, well, we're not going to help them, because that's not what, that's not what we're there to do. We want to support the public. But that has been raised to me by a number of officers that I've spoke to over the last couple of months. Particularly, I did a tour of the Cosham Fire Station, and that was one of the things that was brought up as a concern. If you don't mind, Chair, I've got a few other things. I'll list these in order, then hopefully if you could just answer them all in one big go. Paragraph 14, and you highlighted it in your speech, Alex, that obviously some stations have an 80% on-call availability, which is great. But this does mean that other stations are performing at a dramatically lower rate. Given the average on-call is 61.9%, with significantly lower daytime availability at 44%, what assurance can officers give members that this remains safe and what measurable improvements should we expect from the 200,000 on-call availability project by when? The other thing I want to highlight is the response times and the call handling. The report identifies call handling time as the largest driver of increased response times. But what specific actions are being taken to reduce call handling delays, and how will those changes and the definition of the critical call be reported transparently to members here? And I guess the other thing that I want to bring up is obviously in relation to paragraphs 11 and 12 about the delivery plan slippage and capacity. 6 must activities have been reported overdue despite them being defined as non-negotiable. Obviously non-negotiable should be non-negotiable. You know, that word's there because it shouldn't be slipped or it shouldn't be missed. What caused the slippages? And are members confident the service has the capacity to deliver high concentration of must activities scheduled for the December to March? Thank you.
So thank you, thanks for the question, and I'll work through each of the ones that you've asked individually. So the on-call question, and Alex, as you say rightly, highlights some really positive practice and some high numbers of availability in terms of that percentage for on-call. You're right, it then is reflected by some areas that aren't quite so positive. I think that for us as fire and rescue services across the country is a real challenge, that on-call capability and on-call availability. So it's certainly something that we are aware of as a sector and that we're working hard on here in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. I think just for members' awareness, and I'm sure members are aware, we live slightly differently these days, and society is different in terms of how we used to work, live and operate and socialise in our communities. That's very different now. So the people that we used to have available for us as an on-call service or a retained service that used to be available in their communities now go out to work, they go out to shop, they go out to socialise. So that's made some real impacts for us in terms of our on-call teams. But we're still working really closely with them to try and maximise that and support them in terms of being as available as they can be at various times of the day and night when we need them. So it's an ongoing challenge. I think in terms of your question is how are we looking to monitor that? So we've got some elements that we're looking to embed next year around supporting the availability of our on-call teams in our Year 2 activities. So from April next year, that will hopefully enable us to know when we've got our teams available immediately, but also perhaps widen that scope so that we know actually we might not have them within the 4 minutes that we require, but we might be able to then know when they're available within a 10-minute window or a 20-minute window. So it gives us a better understanding of that organisational resilience from an operational perspective. So I guess that's the first answer. The call handling times, I will have to refer to Alex slightly on this, but we do have some challenges around our partnership, and that when calls drop over to our partners in other areas, it can lead to an increase in that call handling time. And we also operate in a sense of making sure that we're responding to the right specific incident type, and to gather and gain that information now can take us slightly longer. But again, to try and assure members, it's something that we're working hard with our control and our mobilisation teams to try and reduce that where we can, to keep that number as a minimum. The last point I think you made around the 6 must-do activities being overdue. I've got one of those, so I can answer that one. I'm not sure about the other areas of the organisation. If you want to drop in, then do. But certainly one of my must-do activities is around an information sharing and information storage system. So we're slightly governed in that instance, as an example for your question, by third-party organisations, so those outside of our control, so working with those in the private sector to support us. So that has added some slippage in my area, as an example. So we're not, I guess my point is, we're not completely in control of all of those, but we're working really hard with partners to be able to cover that off and make sure that they do deliver within time. I don't know if you wanted to add anything on that.
Yes, happy to come in, James. So I think it's also worth noting that the report flags that we're also ahead of schedule for 6 as well. And as James says, sometimes there are other factors at play. I think just to give members reassurance, within all of our directorate boards, we have monthly scrutiny of the progress of all of those activities. We also come together as a group of officers within our heads of service and executive group every quarter to really scrutinise where we are with all those activities, and we're confident that in the next report you'll see that progress, and things have even moved on since the 30th of September, which is the cut-off for this report. So there's ongoing scrutiny, and we are ahead of schedule in a number of activities as well.
Stephen.
My question was one of the ones that was asked by George, so I have nothing to add.
Okay, thank you. Fran?
Yeah, I'm like George. I'm really worried about this creepingly long response time. I know it's a few seconds, but that worries me, and I think it would worry the public. And it's due to call handling. Are you dealing with that really robustly? I'm sorry, it's the same question. I'm just asking, is it being dealt with robustly? Because I think that's something that will worry people. And it was on the news the other day as well, or my husband mentioned it. And secondly, very quickly, what specific prevention work are you looking to scale up? Because obviously we've had increased outdoor fires. Are you targeting specific areas or putting out more media messages for this year? Working with councils? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So the call times one is probably deal with that first. So yeah, to give you some assurance, we are dealing with that robustly. So as Alex referred to, that partnership group meet on a monthly basis at both tactical and strategic level to try and really drive down, understand where some of those challenges are in terms of the call mobilisation times, how they're increasing. So that is work that is ongoing. I think also just reflecting some of the earlier conversations, for us to be aware of in the room, what we have done, unfortunately, in recent times is we have reduced that frontline workforce and that resilience that we perhaps did have across our organisation. So that has had an impact as well as the call mobilisation time. So just for us to be aware of that, and I think that some of the impacts of that. But what we are doing, again, for that assurance, is really trying to work to ensure, so how can we now work best to make sure that availability is appropriate, we've got the resources in the right place when we need them, so to give that assurance that is ongoing. The final question that you asked was around prevention. And I think you asked about where, and if you don't mind just...
outdoor fires,
so
increasing those.
I think we're having kind of colder, wetter winters, warmer summers and drier summers, and that's leading to us in a number of areas to have a kind of an increased incidence across our areas. Our prevention teams are working really hard to try and identify those the most vulnerable. So what we've got working really well, and the report reflects that, is our safe and well visits and our home fire safety visits for our residents in those most vulnerable areas. What we're also looking to do over the current period now, we've been scoping that this year, is trying to broaden that. So how can we make sure that we are better prepared for the other types of incidents that we might get? So wildfires, flooding, how can we work with agencies and partners to try and prevent some of that and try and reduce the occurrences of that and hopefully reduce the overall, incident numbers that we're having across the board?
Okay. I think I just want reassurance that the prevention work is being done and not just talked about.
Yeah, absolutely.
No disrespect.
No, absolutely. And I'd really be happy to kind of share some of that wider information of what that plan looks like now and also ongoing.
And just to supplement what James has said, obviously my team worked really closely with James's prevention team to sort of have a data-led approach to where we're going to target those prevention campaigns. Okay. We also work around how we might use the People's Panel to sort of triangulate with the data analysis that we do and get that public perspective on some of those incident types. And that's the plan in the new year, is to do some work around the People's Panel in a climate space to supplement the data that we already provide with community safety to help feed into the campaigns that James cites.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, the Chief wishes to say something.
Thank you, Chairman. It was just briefly because a number of the points that have been raised do relate to our operational activity, whether through the prevention work that we're doing or whether through our response activity. One of my priorities when I came into the service was to embed a sense of operational excellence. And this is really important to recognise that it's not just our operational staff on fire engines that take part in the rescues. It's all of our staff. Everybody in the service has played a part in some of those rescues that take place, whether it's our fleet technicians making sure that we keep our fire engines on the run, whether it's our health and safety staff making sure that our firefighters are as safe as they can be when they go out there and undertake those activities, or whether it's our fire control staff who are handling the calls in the first instance and then directing our fire engines to go out and to take part in those rescues. And for me, there are some really basic parts of doing that before we think about some of the innovation that we can do to make sure that we're doing that in the best way that we possibly can, not just for today but for tomorrow and the future as well. So we're exploring what we need to do to make sure that we have a really solid operational response for the whole of the service where everybody plays a part, so that we can then look onto some of those future activities. So it's just worth noting in that first instance. And there have been quite a few questions around our our activity and our prioritisation of activity. And just to provide some assurances, on a quarterly basis, Alex mentioned that we do come together and we review our planning process to make sure that we are ensuring that we've got the right resources that sit behind some of these activities. And that does mean, realistically, given we have less resources, that some of those things will be reprioritised, because it's more important to me that we have a realistic plan in place. That means that our staff don't fall over because we're putting too much pressure to deliver against a time scale. But that is a fluid process and something that we're constantly revisiting. So I hope that that gives you some reassurance based on some of the comments and the questions that have come forward so far.
David.
Chairman. Well, there are two of us. I think.
Drew.
It's so common.
Just a quick one, really. And in my champion role of CO2, I can invite you all to look at page 195, titled Carbon Pathway. I think I'd like to rename that something because it sounds a bit dark and dingy, and I can't call it the yellow brick road, but anyway, look, all those graphs, pictures worth 1,000 words, are moving in the right direction, and I just thought I would highlight that positive move for everyone, that we're doing our bit. Thank you.
Good man, thank you. Sally?
Yeah, just going back to call response times again, more the call handler. Just a suggestion, and it may have already been thought about, but I found out about this app through the Fire Authority. What 3 words? I'm just thinking that the general public there's a lot of people out there that don't know about it. And I think if we did some comms on it, or put out information that people can download this app, so if they are in a situation, they don't really know where they are, there could be a passerby driving through and there's a fire, they have no idea where they are. And yeah, I don't know whether that might help with the call handling times, just because it's about finding the location, isn't it? That's what slows it up a little bit, or so I'm told in the past. Just a suggestion that we could put some comms out promoting that app.
Okay, got that, Jane? Okay, thank you. Lou?
Thank you very much. And I'm not quite so worried about the call handling time, because I felt when we had that briefing about getting that additional information, meaning we got it right more often and quicker, those couple of seconds actually saved lots of time in the overall process. So I feel quite reassured by that. And I was also pleased to see that staff are beginning to feel more confident about disclosing their protected characteristics. The area that I was a little concerned about is the lack of people who may have an impairment or not have an impairment disclosing their disability, because that is significantly lower than the English Fire and Rescue Service average. And though it has gone up a few percentage points, it's not gone up very much. And I feel by knowing that we are the kind of organisation that will respond positively to make sure that our colleagues aren't potentially suffering in silence or feeling that they can't be themselves, is hugely important, because everybody should be working as a team, and I'd really like to see that area travelling up. So I know there's been some work done, but is there anything else that's being done to help people to disclose? And it may be that there's more people who are happy to say, no, actually, I don't have an impairment, but the level is fairly low. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Yes, it is an area of concern that we still know staff are not wanting to, or not being able to share all of their kind of protected characteristics. We are seeing improvements, and we continue to kind of support staff to disclose, and we put regular communications out. We also have a strong network group, Fire Enable, who support employees who may either have a disability or want to support other employees who have a disability. So, and that's got a good network group. It's well attended, and I know that they continue to support one another. We also have in place what we call personal supportive passports, which are ways that people who perhaps recognise that they have some neurodivergence and might benefit from support in terms of their learning or their support from their managers, that is a system they can use in order to kind of share their specific requirements, and that's quite well used as well. So we have a number of mechanisms in place, but it is something that we continue to try and encourage disclosure on, and will continue to do so.
Okay. George. Briefly, because we're running out of time, please.
Yeah, no worries. Just in relation to the workforce sickness and stuff, obviously I know the increase has been small, but it's still an increase. And you obviously mentioned musculoskeletal and mental health absences. Do officers have any idea of what the root causes are and what preventative actions being taken to react to this proactively rather than reactively? And obviously making sure that there's not like a longer term resilience issue.
Yeah, thank you. So in terms of our support staff, who we have seen an increase, particularly around the kind of mental health or stress-related absences, we know that some of that is unfortunately related to the amount of change that team have experienced this year. So they are the people that have been going through redundancies, restructures, and that has impacted on those teams. And so we acknowledge that. And we recognise that that's been a particularly challenging time for them. So I think that's where we have seen that increase. In terms of the musculoskeletal and the increase, particularly for our whole-time and on-call staff, we know that is often related to injuries. What we are looking to do is introduce a new fitness assessment, which we've been piloting over the last couple of months, which we believe is better suited to making sure that they are fit for the role that they are doing, and will ensure that they continue to maintain the kind of physical fitness required for their role. So it is more role specific rather than sort of purely cardio based. And our hope is that we will begin to see how that improves musculoskeletal injuries over time.
Okay. I've asked the Chief, the Executive have a dashboard principle about what's going on a regular update basis, which we used to see a bit of, and I think it would help the authority if we actually saw it on a more regular basis. It's almost a sort of what-to-do list and how things are going, and I think that would help us if at every APAG we had a quick look at what is happening, so we are as up-to-date as the Executive are. Would that be helpful for you?
Absolutely.
Yeah, is that right? Yeah. Okay. I have asked that the annual performance report here be sent to, I said at the last county council meeting, be sent to all councillors so they're up to date. I mean, it's on the website, but they're not going to look at the website. If we stick it in their face, they'll look at it.
Just email the PDF and I can share it with.
Yeah, okay, and you can share it. And also to the Lord Lieutenant and the two High Sheriffs and the Isle of Wight Lord Lieutenant, who are great supporters of ours, just so they know what's going on. Okay, Adam? All right. Right, there is a recommendation, which is that the 25-26 mid-year performance update report be noted by the full authority. Good. Moving to item 10, the Property Matters report. And I would ask Shantha if you would introduce this, please.
Thanks, Chair. So briefly, this report sets out routine property transactions completed under delegated authority. So it's something that you're familiar with. The changes, the mainly adjustments to partner licences and occupancy, which result in a net income reduction of just over £32,000 for this year. Despite that, we still remain on track to generate more than £1.5 million of estate income throughout 25-26. All actions that noted within their support efficient asset use. Clearly, they maintain strong partnerships and they align with our safety plan and expectations around public value.
Okay, members, any questions? David, please.
One that's more broadly related to our estate, and it's to do with chemical contamination, which you may know something about, because I was listening the headline was dozens of factory workers were exposed to toxic chemicals within firefighting foam over decades. BBC file on 4 investigates can reveal, or as I call it, the Home Service on the wireless. But look, the point is that there were chemicals PFOS and PFOA, part of the PFAS family of substances, which were part of foam used in firefighting. And I just wondered if any of our estates we'd cleared it all out. I'm just thinking of safety of our own staff, which is paramount. And I know we're doing other stuff, but it was just highlighted quite conveniently on the wireless early this week, Chairman.
The wireless. Chancellor.
Yeah, no, just to sort of come back in more general terms, obviously, as you know, contaminants and managing how we expose our staff is something that we're embedding deeper and deeper within that. Specifically on those items, I don't have a technical knowledge, but what I can tell you is that this is not something that has been flagged at all through the NFCC, so I'm pretty confident that's not the case. Or if that were the case, I would come back.
George.
I've got a few points to make, Chair, but obviously with the need of time, I'm happy to have answers at a later date via email, if that would suffice. Just want to raise, obviously, the report says about the reduction of use from partners of our accommodation, SCAS, 3 stations, NHS, existing service HQ, Solent Transport. This does create income erosion and underused space. So I'm just looking, do our officers are aware of a broader trend? And what's our strategy to replace this lost service, essentially, or lost income? The other question I've got is in relation to, you've mentioned that a number of the leases have turned into licences. I want to know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, because obviously licences usually are more volatile, because it's a lot easier to get out of a licence than it is a lease. So I think that potentially leaves us in a more volatile position, which kind of leads on to the fact that the report says that there's been no risks identified at all. I think that's arguably optimistic, given the fact that we've lost a couple of contracts, and you know, yes, we've got £1.5 million of regular income, but we've lost 32,000. But obviously, if we're swapping from leases to licences, I would say that there may be a risk. So I'd be interested to know why there's such confidence that there's no risk at all. And yeah, that's basically all I wanted to flag. But I'm happy to have an answer at a later date if time is required.
Perhaps in the onus of time, we can provide a subsequent briefing at the next APAG to go into more detail on some of those queries.
All right, George? Yeah. Okay. Any more members? David Harrison?
Mine's quite a quick one. With local government reorganisation and the demise of large organisations, I know that there's a thought being given to assets that they own. I just wonder whether anyone on the authority is keeping a watching brief on possibilities for any assets that may be of interest to us.
So obviously we need to position ourselves really positively as a service and an authority in terms of the upcoming wider local government reorganisation. What I would also say is that our properties and facilities team are hot on commercial opportunities and always looking, and indeed a lot of the decisions that you have taken with respect to our estate have been taken at speed, in the sense that we always remain agile because the market does change quite quickly. So it is a particular strength of that team.
Okay.
I think that's a yes.
That's a yes. Members, anything else? Right, if I can refer to the recommendation, which is that the items undertaken by officers under delegated authority set out in the paragraph 6 be noted by the full authority. Noted. Thank you. Moving on then, I have a statement to make. To resolve that the public be excluded from the meeting during the following items of business, as it is likely, in view of the nature of the business to be transacted or the nature of the proceedings, that if members of the public were present during these items, there would be disclosure to them of exempt information within paragraphs 3 and 5 of Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 72. And further, that in all circumstances of the case, the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information for the reasons set out in the report. Members, Do you agree that we now move into exempt? Agreed. Okay, so those not entitled to stay, don't. Are we switched off? All done. Thank you, Sparks. Right, so we're now on to item 12, the quarterly budget update report.